Got something to say about this topic? Drop us a short voice note on the Leeds WhatsApp hotline. That's 072 562 3179.
A very warm, some would say humid welcome to Pretoria for day one of the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry into allegations of criminality, political interference and corruption in the criminal justice system in this country as we know it. Day one seen the necessary foundations being laid for the Commission to critically hear KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's main allegations that the heart of the SA Police Services has thus been infiltrated by criminal syndicates. We both decided to wear dark colours today. I don't understand it, but okay. But joining me now is in the Leeds hot seat is our specialist legal journalist Karyn Maughan to help us navigate the very finer details of Mkhwanazi's basically the foundation of his evidence today. Karyn, how are you doing?
I'm excellent. It's a fascinating day to be here. Of course, we're seeing, I don't know, our listeners can't see this, but we are coming to you from a desk that is essentially in the middle of a broadcast landscape. Our colleagues from around the broadcast media, ENCA, Newsroom Africa, EWN, have all had many studios put up around us, and now we are broadcasting in the middle of that kind of media heartland.
And very hot. And of course we had to be in Pretoria for it, right?
Well, you have to understand that I'm thawing out because we've got 80 blow van ons hemel aircon in that auditorium. So I'm actually enjoying the warmth, I have to be honest with you.
Fantastic, man. Look, there's been a lot being said in the last sort of like hour and a bit. I think let's start off with sort of like the main bombshell allegation or the synopsis, if you will, of what Mkhwanazi stated thus far. Let's have a listen to this bite very quickly, Karyn, and then we'll come back to the discussion shortly. Let's have a listen now.
It is at real risk of a total collapse if nothing is done. Therefore, an urgent and effective interventions are required in order to avert this outcome. And I believe this commission will stand to play a very important role in order to help us to prevent this total collapse of the justice system in our country.
Look, that's basically the nice big bow of summary on top of it all. Take us through the last hour or so. I know there's been quite a bit said, but in terms of that foundation, it's understanding the ranks within the SAPS, understanding the scope of what's going to be covered, and of course this really long timeline of around 2 years, which we're going to sort of hit during the next couple of months, right?
Well, essentially what Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi is trying to do is set up how the political killings task team came into existence. He says, look, we've had this issue in KZN of these political killings, how they've occurred, how they can, in many instances, be linked to corruption, people being murdered because they stand in the way of tenders being granted to people. And essentially what happened was that the Madlanga Commission was put up in place by the provincial government of KZN to investigate this issue of political killings. The Madlanga Commission then results in the setting up by the president of this interministerial task team, interministerial committee, which of course consists of these various ministers of, the police, of the defense force, of the justice department. They then say, look, we believe that the political killings task team that was previously in existence hasn't really been getting the job done, and we want a new team set up that will then involve police officials from all over the country, people who have very specific expertise in particular areas and are then brought in to really bring the weight of that expertise to tackle this particular issue. And he says that's exactly what we did. And we did it, and he's been detailing how it required budget, obviously, because you've got cops from around the country, that they need to be accommodated. They need, laptops. They need offices to work from. And he's saying essentially that was part of how, he was involved in the early setting up of this political killings task team. And what, of course, in this just in the last few moments before the adjournment, he was being questioned by Mbuyiseli Madlanga, of course, the retired acting, Deputy Chief Justice, about why he said This political killings task team was unmatched, Graeme, in terms of what it was able to do in terms of investigation and also in terms of prosecution. And he's saying, look, I've got the statistics, I will make them available to the Commission. But we believe that in terms of its ability to secure convictions and result in arrests, it really was the most successful law enforcement organization in the country's history.
Yes, and just hearing the curriculum vitae of his past, joining the old SAPS around 1993 onwards, he's really been in all spheres of policing as we know it.
But, this is what's going to be so interesting is the contestation about the political killings task team. And we got a little tail end of where the controversy lies right at the end, which is, of course, in relation to the Forte investigation, where we've seen, Sarah Berger, Bradley Conradi, those forensic, lawyers who were involved in uncovering, the so-called fake qualification scandal around Oscar Mabuyane, and saying they were subjected to extremely what they allege was problematic arrest by the political killings task team, and then were then held in detention in circumstances that they say was completely overblown, completely unnecessary, and saying, there isn't a case against us. We're being targeted because we were exposing corruption at Forte. And so there is contestation, and, we have for instance, human rights activist Mary De Haas has very much come out guns blazing and said this unit have been involved in seriously problematic misconduct. And she had actually written to Senzo Mkhunu earlier this year, last year, really outlining serious allegations of misconduct against that unit and saying, they were committing human rights abuses. So, this is not an uncontested space, and we're going to see the push and pull of those allegations in the days and weeks to come. And what we heard from Terry Motau, who's the chief evidence leader, was like, Mkhwanazi's evidence, we're not simply accepting.
Yes, we're impartial.
We're impartial. We're going to, in the first phase, hear the testimony of Mkhwanazi and people who are supportive of his narrative, who include Fani Masamolo, of course, the National Police Commissioner. But we're also going to hear the responses of people like Senzo Mkhunu, who Graeme is going to be called about to give evidence about why he disbanded or wanted to disband that political killings task team. And the people who Mkhwanazi will implicate about why they say he's wrong. And of course, Mkhwanazi will then respond to that. But, Terry Motau, as you heard, really stressing that we are an impartial investigation. We don't simply accept what Mkhwanazi is saying. And we will, hear evidence from people who say he's fundamentally not providing the full and correct evidence about what has happened here.
Well, did you see the news? Guess who's in the back of a police van on his way back to his cell in Kgosi Mampuru II prison in Pretoria? Any guesses?
I heard that from you when Musi Kat Matlala, your favorite person.
He's been denied bail in the Alexandra Magistrates Court today. Of course, the timing of that, the irony is not lost on all of us. As, of course, we know, arrested earlier this year alongside two alleged hitmen. And the magistrate, Saita Prinsloo, in this particular case, saying the applicant has failed to demonstrate, quote unquote, that he does not pose a flight risk at this stage. I also want to play this particular clip, if we may, just setting out sort of the scene with the former acting Deputy Chief Justice, Mbuyiseli Madlanga, kicking off everything, if you will, today. Let's have a listen to some of the main sort of sentiments that he shared.
The subversion of the criminal justice system may take any number of forms. Without purporting to be exhaustive, it may come as downright intimidation. It may consist in improper promises or inducements. It may take the form of corruptly influencing the decision-making or functioning of those responsible for the smooth running of the system. All these forms and others are a cancer to what a proper criminal justice system should be. Ours from today onwards is to investigate whether our criminal justice system is what it should be or whether it has been infiltrated by criminal syndicates. Words from us must end here, and we must start with the investigative process.
Finally hearing it, finally being present here today. It's been touted, spoken about for such a long time. The commission's been delayed. This morning it was a bit of a rough start. It was difficult to get sort of media accreditation sorted out. It was a little bit, rough around the edges in getting everything ready. Proceedings seemed a little bit slow. There was also concerns about security. But here we are. Finally, we get to get on with this.
Exactly. And I mean, we do have some of the best advocates in the country. Karyn Maughan, of course, being integrally involved in the investigation into the looting of VBS. Matthew Chaskelson, of course, the late Arthur Chaskelson's son, renowned for his role in the investigation that was done by the state capture inquiry under the leadership of then Deputy Chief Justice, himself also Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. And so, I think they thought the place was going to be packed. Of course, it's not. It's a very quite empty auditorium, but ordinary members of the public sort of trickled in the back of the auditorium, and then of course, preeminent journalists in the room, Ferial Haffajee, Franny Rabkin, a lot of the really, really hard-hitting...
Karyn Maughan.
No, what's that?
hey, we're live.
Who are really understand the importance of how significant this investigation is. And you and I were talking about this earlier this morning, where our South African public is deeply frustrated about the lack of proper delivery in terms of the investigation of corruption, and this overwhelming feeling increasingly that there is a kind of political, potentially politically protected elite who are potentially getting away with profound levels of corruption, and possibly also, criminality linked to political killings. And that's what this investigation really has to get to the bottom of, and examine whether there are these systemic reasons for why that has happened, and if this is the case, what can be done to address it in a meaningful way.
I touched on this earlier, and myself and Bernard Edwicks, our colleague, court and crime reporter, we've stopped Jeremy Michaels, the spokesperson for the commission, because of these concerns that had been raised. It's been on various other media channels about a bit of an element of a lack of security in terms of the entrance to the commission grounds here, which is currently being housed at the Brigitte Mabandla Justice College in central Pretoria. Let's have a listen very quickly. I think you're going to find this interesting as to what Jeremy's conceded about that lax security levels seen earlier on day one of the commission of the Madlanga inquiry. Have a listen here.
Security around the commission is absolutely critical. In fact, we have started raising very seriously our concerns regarding what happened this morning. There were some teething issues with the security, but I'm happy to report that since we raised the issues, the necessary is in place. It's fully functional now. There's no threat. The building was locked down after a sweep, full security sweep this morning. And so from the Commission side, we are happy that all is in order. But of course, we have to deal very seriously with those issues that arose very early this morning. The access issues relate to the premises, the parking lot and so on. But the actual building, no one had access to the building. And as I say, it was locked down very early this morning. Full security sweep. You've seen the dogs, I'm sure. Quite a number of police dogs from the K9 unit, part of that sweep. And so we are happy that all is in order now.
Because, Karyn, a magnitude event of this magnitude, it's a no-brainer in my mind's eye that security should have been beefed up a whole lot more.
Well, essentially, Mkhwanazi, as you rightly point out, is a career police official who has essentially said that elements of the criminal justice system, if not the entire criminal justice system, including the NPA and possibly also the judiciary as well, have been infiltrated by a criminal syndicate or criminal syndicates who are utilizing that alleged, implementation or infiltration to ensure that they are protected from the consequences of their own conduct. And, that there's even been mention of potential, drug cartels. This is organized crime. So, of course, in that context, one would really apprehend that even on a prima facie level, if his allegations are even possibly true, the security here needs to be very, very, very tight to protect him, but to also protect the other people. And we've had an acknowledgement of that. Terry Motau in the opening address, saying there will be circumstances in which evidence leaders will apply for investigations to be done in camera. I mean, that's unprecedented. We didn't even see that in the state capture inquiry. And I remember Matthew Chaskelson, who is here today, saying at a previous press conference that that's because undercover police officers may well be called as witnesses. These are cops who, according to them, have infiltrated the very same criminal, syndicates that may be implicated in infiltration of the criminal justice system. So this really is a very, very intensive investigation that we are unlikely to ever see the likes of again. And if we don't get it right in terms of the protection, particularly, Graeme, in circumstances where this inquiry is legally responsible, the terms of reference make it clear it is responsible for the safety and security of witnesses and potential witnesses. So it has to be very, very, very stringent about security, because of that legal obligation, but because the devastation of anything possibly going wrong in a scenario where South Africans are faced with a very real possibility, based on the allegations of Mkhwanazi, that our criminal justice system is rotten from the inside. Can you imagine the fallout if something went wrong here? It would be unbelievably problematic on so many levels.
Absolutely. On another side note, there's a court application tomorrow, of course, brought by the Mkhonto West Sizwe party. Did you hear the chants of the demonstrators from this particular party?
All 8 of them.
All 8 of them, not 300, according to Mr. Abel Tau, who's the with the Gauteng branch of this particular party. Let's have a listen very quickly what he had to tell Bernadette and I outside the gates, in the expectation that 300 demonstrators would come out, but actually it was only around, well, according to our colleague, it increased to 10. Let's have a listen to this.
There has never been in this country a time where a commission started on a Wednesday. Even the 1st of September would have been a Monday. But the fact that he is starting this commission today tells us that it is rushed, so that when we go to court tomorrow to challenge this very commission that is sitting here today, that they would have started. Now, that decision on its own is very suspect, is very unfortunate, because we are spending money. There was a valid reason other than the fact that they didn't have computers before. There was a valid reason now to wait 2 more days and start on a Monday. We feel that very strongly that this commission should not be sitting. We believe that South Africa should not be paying 147 million to ensure that the president can decide whether or not to charge Minister Mkhunu. We feel that Minister Mkhunu should have been fired. We believe that the decision to hire now Minister Kachalia is irrational and irregular. And so we are going to be saying that to the High Court, and therefore Justice Madlanga should have waited 2 more days so that he gives that process an opportunity to be expedited.
No, the argument doesn't feel very fleshed out, and I'm a little bit, I don't think it's going to succeed.
No, I mean, first of all, I think that they face the very real prospect that they'll get chucked out on urgency, because, the president has said this is a classic scenario of self-created urgency. They are essentially, and Ramaphosa stated in his affidavit, he said, you trying to wage a political battle in a legal context, and it's simply inappropriate. Under the Constitution, Ramaphosa remains adamant that he has the power to hire and fire ministers, and that, of course, he argues, involves the ability to also suspend them in the circumstances that Mkhunu currently faces. And he's saying that, essentially the MK, have pursued, he described it as a sort of reckless path of litigation by going to the Constitutional Court first, and then trying, by asking him questions after the fact to then create to create the impression of urgency where they had none. And I think also, Graeme, part of the problem is that the MK have this really unfortunate pathology of approaching the courts and then with really bad cases, and then when they lose, attacking the judges who rule against them.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, it's going to be fascinating because, of course, one of the judges is Ronald Tolme, who, of course, famously invalidated Busisiwe Mkhwanazi's Estina report and was subsequently reported to the JSC by her. And, she's also demonstrated a lot of sort of judicial independence. And I think both her and her colleague will be hard-pressed if I find any circumstances under which to grant the MK what they want. And what they want is an order suspending this inquiry from proceeding, pending the outcome of their main legal challenge, which, the proverbial snowball's hope in hell, I would argue.
Okay, Karyn. For those who perhaps didn't see the proceedings of the last hour or so, just remind us where we are at the moment. Of course, day one, a lot of the foundation, as we've previously stated, has been set in terms of aspects to come later, so that it's already into the record in terms of technical terms, the timeline of events, where we're sort of standing, so that we can get to the meat and bones a little bit down the line, right? What are we going back to inside in the next short while?
So it's really going to be about the political killings task team. It's going to be about, what Mkhwanazi says, was its successes in its work, and why he believes it was disbanded by the police minister. Of course, he very much believes it was for nefarious purposes, and it's going to be that stuff about, Brown Makhotsi, Kat Matlala, Senzo Mkhunu's relationship with either or one of them, if that is indeed the case. And then it's going to be this widespread, he's going to be essentially asked to substantiate what were quite alarming claims that this was just one incident in a widespread web of infiltration of the criminal justice system. And we'll also hear, because he's made allegations that people in the NPA are compromised and the judiciary is compromised. So, there was I think it was Terry Motau was saying it. It's like he's going to have to name names now. And I think everyone's going to be waiting to hear who those names may be.
Yeah, all of our colleagues, or Team News 24 is waiting with bated breath for all the big headlines to emerge over the next short while. And of course, just as a side note, perhaps you maybe didn't know this, but Jeremy Michaels, the spokesperson for the Commission, was saying to our colleagues a short while ago that around 5 days has been set down for Mkhwanazi's testimony. So we could be going into Monday and Tuesday next week. Newsflash, Karyn, so bring lots of snacks.
Yeah, I came with snacks, this.
Yeah, you're the snack,
I was eating
queen.
I was eating my snacks right before we went on air, much to your chagrin. He's like, please put the jungle oats bar down.
That's specialist legal journalist Karyn Maughan, who's my guest in the hot seats on the lead from a very hot Pretoria. Summer's around the corner, and this is day one. The foundation's being set for the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. 3 months? I don't think so. This thing could potentially be 3 years, Karyn. Till the next one.
Thank you, Graeme.
To know when the next episode drops, hit the like, follow, and subscribe buttons on our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast channels.